Gentlemen, good morning. It's Wednesday the 24th. I've had 3 hours and 5 minutes of sleep. This is going to be my first sip of the morning. So hence, my name is last on the stand-up roster. I expect we might have a couple of other people join, but irrespective, let's have a meaningful conversation. Let's dig into something.
All right. Uh, so I guess I'll start. So with this couple of pointers that I wanted to know. One was I guess this is sort of more in line with the layer 5 ng site, but just wanted to know that like we had sent across a couple of more you know like things to use. So I mean like in the call there we had like sort of decided which particular thing we should go ahead with. So the one that was mentioned by Ayush should that one like because we sort of collectively decided, okay, that is a good option to go through. So should we go ahead with that one, or would you recommend some others? Because I mean we did search for other ones, but I mean that seemed to be quite good, the one that like Ayush had shared.
If no one, I don't have a better suggestion. You're right. if no one, if no one else has a better suggestion, yeah, let's start. Or like, hey, I'll go buy that one. Now.
And the colors also were decided, right? I guess Vineet and Shruti, they had decided on the colors. I mean, so we can get started with the basic design, and then the color combinations can always be changed from the CSS aspect.
Very good. I did ask Karen, whose last name is Hippataco, I think. It's actually a made-up name. She made up that name. Her real name is something else. It's funny. Anyway, she is in UX and focuses there, and has in the past helped with some colors and a bit of logo design. I just rolled onto my. Anyway, I'll be asking her and pushing her. And if we don't get meaningful feedback, I might go pull someone else in, because I'm not sure what like third color or fourth color is the most appropriate complement from a scientific model perspective, from the perspective of what's complementary or what's of the same hue. And so Shibai, I guess briefly to recap, and for those that are just joining, so Dheeraj and Dhruv, Kush, Shibai was just talking about layer 5 ng, and the notion that one of the first steps to move forth with that, with taking layer 5 IO and moving it on to Gatsby and Strappy, is to identify a Gatsby theme. Ayush had identified one in the past. No one else has identified a better one yet. But if anyone knows of a really good Gatsby theme, whether it's free or to be paid for, please point it out, because otherwise we're going to grab one and start.
Yeah, because even in the like in the work call that we had for the layer 5 ng one, it was like everyone came to the common conclusion that everyone sort of liked the one that Ayush has suggested, and we just wanted to have your final say.
Oh, did they? Oh, okay. It was that. Then yep, let's do it. I'll have it over to you guys. I'll go buy it, and I'll have it over to you guys today.
All right.
Real quick, Shivai, remind me of the landscape work. Your restyling, I think, of the SMI conformance.
Yeah.
Is
it's already done. So I think I created a pull request. Let me check. Whether I, because at least in my local PC, like I downloaded the latest code that Ayush had sent out. So I had just waited for him to sort of finish his pull request that he had created. So I'll just do that.
Okay.
Because it's there. I mean, I've also pushed it locally on my GitHub. So I'll just, if you want, I'll create a pull request really quickly.
Yeah, please. Okay. Because I don't think that Ayush has anything else left that he's going to do.
Okay.
Very good. Anything else, Shivai? Else over to Nitish.
Yeah, sure.
And so, gents, we're yeah, Nitish, go ahead.
I don't really have much to talk about. Just waiting on the operator side of things so that we can kick that off. I've been using the only side from the operators. I've been using Cube Builder at my current job, and it's okay. It's not that bad. I mean, Operator SDK has a lot of fluff over Cube Builder, but it usually runs a couple of versions behind the cube builder master or head. So it's just a matter of uh, what kind of features we need, and it completely depends on whether operator SDK can support that or we stick to cube builder. But nevertheless, it's the same way of writing our code. So there's not much difference.
Let me ask you this: if we ended up starting without Cube Builder or without Operator SDK, and we just focused on a custom controller,
Mhm.
is that a mistake when later on we figure out that would have really been better had we, used larger framework?
Uh, I think it depends on whether uh, we want to act on custom resources, or we probably serve as a web server or a gRPC server and take decisions based on requests coming in. So do you want to go with an imperative model? Do you want to go with a declarative model? So
Mm,
if we want to do declarative, then we have to go with an operator. If we want to do imperative, then it's going to be a controller.
right. Huh. Right. Yeah. The core mesh sync use case is about reading from the environment, is about more of the imperative way in which you're describing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, doing it efficiently and staying up to speed with all of the changes, all of the scheduling decisions in some
Mm-hmm.
respects. The notion that we do want to, yeah, when we move into a declarative model, one of the use cases there is to re-architect an adapter such that today when we're doing that declarative model, we're doing it through an adapter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's too early for us to do sort of a V2 re-architecture of the adapters. It may be the
Mm-hmm.
case that they should just be CRDs and be Kubernetes native, but we're not there, or rather, yeah.
Yeah, if we're talking only about mesh sync, then I agree that's a controller. If we were, like you're saying, talking about the adapters, state reconciliation is pretty important to make sure everything is up and running. That's where you'd want an operator so that you get to the final state where the mesh is deployed and it's watching. It's basically watching for any events like someone deleting the mesh, uh, and deleting the mesh without actually deleting the custom resource. Then we want to make sure we can stand that back up again. So that's where we'll have to do some state machines and like state reconciliation. But yeah, I agree. Mesh sync is just essentially just a watcher, and uh, it's just querying stuff from the API server. So that can be a standalone controller.
Yeah, actually, and so that's a good question or like way of thinking about it is understanding that uh, understanding that we have a massive vision and roadmap for things that we do want to declare and a state that we do want to manage within or configuration that we do want to manage as Kubernetes objects, that there is an inevitability of the fact that we'll bring out custom resources.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know that, or I wonder. I don't know. This is not me insinuating one way or the next. This is just I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. Like, does it feel ugly and discontiguous when you're working with a project like Meshery and you have to go over, and part of the installation is that it drops in a custom controller, and then another part of the installation is that you install an operator, and there's a few CRDs, or do people not really blink an eye? There's a question about how it feels to the user. Then there's also a question about, well,
Yeah, I don't think there's any problem taking that route. I've seen a lot of frameworks that have their controllers doing background jobs, and they have the operator that just acts on the custom resource. So I, I think decomposition is a better design than shoving everything into the controller. And some other issues with controllers are scale. If we were to expose a web server from our operator, uh, from the operator, then it's not really going to scale based on requests coming in or HPA metrics, because it's essentially a leader follower model, but the followers are passive, not active. So failover is going to be slower. Um, yeah, that's where we make our decisions. Controllers can use horizontal auto scaling. We can look at different metrics based on what kind of requests are coming in and how well it's performing in terms of CPU and memory, but the operator won't be able to do that. Operator should just act on the custom resource we define, and that's it. It shouldn't try to do anything else. So it takes an input, creates an output. That's all it should do.
it, yeah, it becomes pretty clear that for that first priority of mesh sync, that
Mhm.
that it really is just a custom controller, and that
Yep.
even beyond that, I guess the second part of that other question, where I mean, I guess there's more than two questions. You're sort of articulating a third consideration around the actual architectural constraints of using an operator SDK versus and so one of the other questions is, when we do inevitably come to the need to manage custom resources,
Mhm.
um, and that those custom resources will part of their logic will need to account for state that's inside of mesh sync, or like
Mhm.
it, are we did we hamstring ourselves by not having that same custom controller inside of the same SDK, the same operator that is?
If only if we are worried about latency. If this is our slow path and we're not concerned about latency and taking a network hop, then I don't think that's a problem. If we are looking for performance, we want to co-locate everything the way Istio did with Istio D, then sure, we can put it all in one operator.
Right. Yep. Interesting. Yeah, of being on 3 hours of sleep and of what I can foreshadow currently, it is that we will have latency sensitive executions that we want to do, but that, inherently they all are, but to the extent that we're talking, less than 2 milliseconds or less than 5 milliseconds, that it wouldn't have mattered to the human user, human operator in front of the UI. The latency sensitive operations are those that, the design of that feature is predicated upon a performance first architecture, meaning that, hey, these are things that we're trying to run in the data plane because we can execute them real time and it's all about the performance. And so when we actually get to those anyway, it'll be a different ball game, I think.
Let me say this too. We start with the controller that's a standalone deployment, but it's essentially a binary that you start up, right? We can stick that container into our operator SDK deployment as well when we need performance, and then you have the localhost hop, which is definitely more performant than taking a network hop. So our interface is a matter of what our server addresses and ports exposed are.
Last little bit of what you'd said, your audio had cut out. You're saying, hey, the difference is that it'll be in a binary. It might be the difference of a network hop.
Yeah. Yeah, I just meant we'll be, yeah, exactly, just the network hop. You're going over localhost now, so obviously you have better performance. You're not taking latency hits. There's no packet drops. So yeah, I mean, it's not going to be too hard to move the controller container into the operator deployment spec. So right, you start with a separate deployment with a single container right now that's just running mesh sync, and then once you start building the operator, you move that container into your deployment spec for the operator.
All right, there. That's it. That's okay. All right, that answers the whole. And by that time, hopefully it'll be a bit more evident that some of the use cases are better defined and that they are served by a Cube Builder or an operator SDK better than the next.
Right. No, I agree.
Yeah, Lee, before wanted to give you an update. So yesterday I was attending the Linux Foundation's OpenJS a conference that is taking place yesterday and today. So like I was in a meeting with the Google Cloud engineers, and according to our conversation, if you remember that you were told that the reason that we haven't really made a lot of progress in the distributed load testing of the Envoy planes has been that you're waiting for Google's input, right? So basically, I emailed, and I was chatting with this person by the name of Brett, who is a Google Cloud engineer. So he told me that he knows people within his team who are working on the Envoy planes. So he told me to email him the details of the program so that they can probably approach you, and the work can get started on that front. So I mean, I just emailed him yesterday, so hopefully, I mean, we should be hearing from him on this front. Because I guess, as you said, that we haven't really moved forward with that aspect because of Google's involvement in the project.
That's fantastic. That's great. Thanks for that, Shiva. I will. There's a couple of other things to say on that, and I'll do it with you offline. There's a
Okay.
couple,
Okay.
but yeah, can't think of anything
Uh,
else.
Yeah, but they also say that I mean, there were a couple of more projects that they where they are actually using you know distributed testing. So I mean, not specifically for the envoy load planes, but something like Cloud Bees is also something that uses distributed load testing. So they say that if you wanted some like inspiration, you can probably look at a couple of more projects that are using distributed testing, not specifically with relation to the service meshes or with the envoy, but yeah, I mean, they sort of follow similar architecture.
Okay, yeah. And in some respects, it makes a lot of sense that they would be doing distributed testing because core to part of their service is distributed artifacts and the exchange of the caching of um, artifacts in different geographies. I'm guessing.
Yeah,
They don't have Artifactory. What do they have? CloudBees has.
I mean, I have to check it out because I was just informed, so I just went through CloudBees a bit, but I mean, yeah, I can have a conversation with you after the call. Sorry.
Nice. Okay. Good. Good. There's a couple of Googlers in our Slack. Um, Actually, the ones that are responsible for Nighthawk, uh, and so this is good. I think we. I guess the short of it is, I think we have who we need, but it never hurts to have additional contacts and more input and other perspectives. Nitish, thank you for that, Shafaya. Nitish, to get the rubber touching the road on a 2-week conversation is, or 3-week or whatever, is I don't know that we even, like, one of the things to potentially I don't core to what MeshSync can become is an architectural diagram. Is a logical model that says that takes constructs inside of a system like that basically is something like an SMI, sort of slightly, not entirely. And that's to say, there are these things within Istio. There's destination rules, virtual services. There's all these constructs. There's an ingress gateway in Linkerd. There's not an ingress gateway, but there's a service proxy. There's a service proxy in Kuma. There's a service proxy. Like, hey, in each of these,
Right.
and then how do those map to our own? Like, then what we would do is make up something that says this is the Meshery service proxy, and this is all
Right.
these objects. And there's going to be a lot of things that don't map. There's going to be a lot of, but how do we reconcile and how do we reason over any mesh, irrespective of that? There's a fair bit of domain expertise that comes in specific to each service mesh. There's an imperfect model that you will arrive at that just doesn't, where you're going to find the mold being broken. It's safest to, in this sense, it's safest to start with the most robust of the service meshes, because the one that has the most constructs and things to consider for, and sort of and because it's the one that is enjoying more adoption and all this. So to start with Istio and to begin doing a mesh sync, in and around Istio.
So should we, my thought is, since you mentioned SMI, we use the same abstractions like resources that define traffic management, resources that define security, resources that define policies. So we use similar abstractions as SMI. You start with that, and some things are going to be more specific. In Go, you would have interfaces that would be implemented by Istio, implemented by Linkerd, and they'll have their own constructs. So, yeah, I think we can do that. And I think SMI is a good place to start because it identifies the common areas between meshes.
Yep. Yeah. In some respects, if SMI was really well
Courses.
done, we wouldn't need like we're still I'm trying to avoid a longer conversation, but to say that we would still need adapters to go deeper on it isn't.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, here's the other thing. I'm scared of even having started that conversation because it becomes a bit of a roll on just a world of architecting and positioning and trying to figure out how you're mapping and doing without having anything in hand, like a month later.
Mhm.
And it's not. And I guess what I would say is like that we should start like we should that if we had a custom controller today
Mhm.
that had a one for one that was just a direct an untranslated capturing of the fact of everything that's deployed in a Kubernetes environment. So basically all the Kubernetes info and all of the Istio info available in this model in which we've got watches, like all, not everything is going to be of interest to us, but more or less, if we were in that position today, we would be greatly empowered to go off and that have a much more real-time experience inside of Meshery.
Mhm. So are we watching for custom resources too?
Yeah, of Istio's virtual service, for example, like that you.
So from what I'm understanding, let's start with Istio. Uh, find commonalities with Linkerd as the next milestone, or yeah, or build one for Linkerd as well, and then think about what are the common features and how different abstractions can be out of the yeah out of what we created for each one specifically, and yeah, we progress that way. But as a proof of concept, it would be Istio because that's the biggest of the lot with way too many custom resources.
Yeah. Yeah, and then as we work through that, we're yeah, somewhere in there, you're able to draw kind of this jagged line across each of them, where
Mhm.
each of them they've got all these features and all these constructs, and there will be a universal, there will be, a common, every one of them does have a control plane. Every one of them, or almost all of them, does have a small instance of Prometheus, or almost
Mhm.
all of them have a service proxy, but some of those are sidecards, some of those are node agents, and so there's a fair bit of commonality of the core constructs that are going to get us much further down the road than, and um, by the time that we're going deeper and providing, for example, configuration analysis of best practices on a given mesh, there is going to be some commonality of best practices, but quite a few of them, the vast majority of them, and the analyses or the best practices that are really worth something
Mhm.
are mesh specific.
Mhm.
Um, I won't regurgitate what you said. Yeah, let's start right where you described.
Mhm. So a crawl, walk, run, crawl stage is Istio. Then walk is some of identifying abstractions with another mesh, and run would be commonalities across meshes.
Totally. And then, yeah, and then flying is with an operator is with a. So by just to finish that up real quick, and I know for Dhruv and Dheeraj, that some of this was abstract and that we didn't provide a lot of context. My apologies. We're doing that in some respects on purpose because we're trying to do a bit more of a stand-up style meeting. It is one thing to note is that as we've been going through this service mesh performance specification, Nitish, we've been running into, or we've begun to run into a little bit of the same types of questions on whether or not we should be leveraging some things from SMI. And it's actually helpful if we take a moment to describe this because because my answer today is I don't think SMI helps us. So let me describe the issue, and that is that in the service mesh in SMPS today, currently there are two protos that describe describe a service mesh, describe the mesh's configuration. They describe the type of test that you're going to run, the type of load that you're going to run. Part of that is to say, well, we're going to generate a bunch of HTTP load or a different protocol. And well, okay, well, it's one thing to say that we're going to generate HTTP load and just assume that that's a bunch of get operations, but maybe it's a post with, or maybe it's got a cookie, or maybe it's got some other. And as we go to capture that inside of this specification, it's like, well, SMI has a traffic spec, which is intended to identify, it's the same thing. When you go look at that SMI traffic spec, first of all, SMI is not and has never moved very quickly. Of what I see of the traffic spec, there's nothing in hard terms. It's more just English language written out into a specification. So it's not something directly leverageable. But I could be mistaken, and maybe buried in one of the repos is something that we could maybe be more directly inspired by or leverage. So yeah, if you're looking for an excuse to kind of dig into SMI, Naveen, this is in part like one of the questions I wanted to bring up with you. Of the time that you've spent with SMI, I'm not sure. Have you come across the traffic spec much? Because for me, I'm putting the link to what I understand to be the only move spec into a file that I understand. This is the traffic spec, and that I can hear you
Is my audio coming through?
just now. Yep.
Oh, so sorry. So like from traffic spec, what it is it like they support TCP route and HTTP route, but not the gRPC or any other protocol yet. And along with that, as far as I remember, like I worked on traffic spec, I guess, 3 or 4 weeks earlier. So it was just destination, and it was just which service was the destination. So it was not like you are what endpoint did it hit or something like that. So I'll have to look into that. Like I guess it was just service only. Yeah, exactly. The link that you shared, Lee.
Okay. So okay. Okay. So to
Now
me,
it is just saying that, yeah. HTTP and TCP route, just like they only support that on currently, but they do support like methods and all.
Which to me isn't nearly what we would, when you think about the Meshery UI, the performance section, and the fact that people will define some specific headers, cookies that they might want to include. This doesn't capture that. Moreover, even if it did, it's not like it's saving us that much time to just go write that down into a different proto.
Yeah, like the cookies and everything is there, but like uh, it is just HTTP and TCP, and we are bound by that. Like no gRPC or some, like we would have to either way redesign for rethink for gRPC and everything. And the URL part needs to be there. Currently, it just says, okay, this is the route and everything. Like there is no URL part to here.
Even at that, ultimately, we do want to try to add NATs as a protocol as well. Okay, well, good. That answers my question as to whether or not we were not reusing something in SMI that we should be. And it doesn't look like we. Okay, fair enough. Well, so Diraj and Dhruv, do either of the two of you have topics that you'd like to bring up? Actually, I'll start with.
We are just here to get the gist of what this meeting is all about. Yeah, I have nothing to say. Thanks.
Yep. Fair enough. Very good.
Even I have nothing for that. It's my first meeting.
Is it?
Uh, I'm just figuring out, and in this week I will just look on upon the basic aspects of this, and then we'll talk with you later on.
Awesome. Yeah. Diraj, I was curious as to whether or not it was your first meeting. I wasn't sure, just because, just like in the U.S., where every third person you meet has the name Mike, every fourth person you meet has the name Diraj. Or I wasn't sure if that you were someone else. Or do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself, if you would? It'd be nice to get to know you.
Yeah, so I'm Dheeraj Sharma, and I have been currently pursuing electronics and telecommunication from Pune, India, and my graduation just over right now. And if I talk about that, recently I have been selected for the Linux Foundation project for the Open Daylight, and previously I have worked as a Google coding mentor for Koala and Google Summer of Code mentor for Public Lab. And even that, I have been selected as student developer in Summer of Code Space program, where I have worked on Docker image deployments and writing make files and scripts. And I have done some internships, and my main focus lies on the software domains itself. And right now I have been working on Go. I've been learning, doing more courses in this lockdown for Go, and just doing the basic projects so that I can be a part of something great.
You've arrived, man. This is the place. Your focus on Open Daylight, is that active now or something that you'd finished recently?
Uh, it is active and it will be over by August.
Got you. Okay. Say a little bit more if you would. It's a highly relevant project to the concepts that we generally focus on in service mesh land. I feel sorry for you that you're back in OpenStack land, but say more if you would about the particular aspect of Open Daylight that you're focused on.
So basically, I've been working on adding the JSON payloads for the REST APIs. And right now, what I am working on is I am using RFC 8040 URLs, which is a basic format for doing the documentations of replacing the current URLs of REST APIs. And now, first of all, in this week, I have worked on OpenFlow, which is a software-defined networking protocol, where I have used Mininet for that purpose, using a VM. And then there was basic set of switches have been introduced. There is a command in Mininet itself, which is by sudo mrn controller. We use the IP of the Open Daylight controller. Now, Open Daylight runs on a normal local host, 127.0.0.1, and then using that IP, we basically communicate with the Open Daylight and this what we call is as Mininet, because Mininet supports uh, open OBS switches, which is virtual switches for that, and ODL works on the different projects, including OpenFlow, and next aspect is that I am going to work on a netconf and MD cell, which will be I will be just focusing more upon. As of now, I know OpenFlow programming.
We say that last part again. As of now, you know OpenFlow what?
OpenFlow plugin system.
Oh, plugins. Nice. Okay. Yeah. Nice. Nice. Very good. Yeah. Yeah. I think I got everything that you're saying. Hey, the ODL, OpenFlow, Open vSwitch, the RFC 8040 for the manipulation of the URLs, I guess, in the REST APIs.
And then Mininet.
Yeah, say it. Mini what?
Mininet. MININET.
Very good. Okay. Here's something to if you would. So D-Rush, thanks for coming, man. And thanks for sharing about some of your recent focus. The networking centric focus that you're doing right now is quite relevant and interesting to the focus in mesh land. It is interesting and funny how big the networking space is and how large of an area of focus that you're talking about within ODL is, and still this is sort of proves out why service meshes why there is a name for them, because it's such a developer-centric approach to networking. One of the things we've been just talking about in this community is maybe potentially particularly relevant to your focus, and that is that it would be really nice if requests that are coming into REST APIs that are running in workloads that are on top of a service mesh, if we could have the service mesh do some traffic mirroring or some traffic capture, and maybe do the traffic capture and do some traffic replay. I'm going to plant that seed in the back of your mind. We've yet to really have any lengthy discussions on how we would approach some of those use cases.
Yeah, I was listening that, and we just opened about traffic capture, and like Naveen pointed out that gRPC protocol is not being used by that particular. Am I right? The link that you shared. Are you talking about that traffic specs?
Right. Yeah, that particular one is. Did I share which one did I shared the SMI one, which is a bit of a red herring, probably. Probably that traffic specs link is, I think, something that we're saying we're going to intentionally ignore. But you're right. Like that within context of the Meshery project, we do want to ultimately identify a technology that we would use to do traffic mirroring or that traffic capture, traffic replay. And we haven't. So as you're going through ODL and you're focusing there, think if if there's a piece of tech that you find is readily used for that,
Okay.
think about that if you would. That yeah.
I will figure out and will tell you the next.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's yeah.
I will
A-
just tell
a-
you.
And Dheeraj, as you're doing that, I'll say this: that if you, as you're doing that, if you did an investigation into the Envoy proxy's ability to do traffic mirroring or to facilitate traffic capture, that would be enlightening to the rest of us.
I will have this in the back of my while I've been working on this technology on my project.
Oh, thank you. Very good. Welcome. Good, good. Okay. All right, Naveen, I think that's over to you. And Naveen, we can't hear you at the moment.
My microphone is joined.
Oh,
Is hello?
Yep.
Are you able to hear me now?
yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I was working on the SMI stuff, and uh, we have a PR which I will be shifting to the SMI conformance repo and writing a blog post about it. And basically the introductory blog post about the SMI conformance and uh, layer 5 and GSOC. And like traffic access is about like complete traffic spec, I guess, is complete. Like the test cases have been written. We need to like shift it to maybe SMI conformance repo and think about the architecture on how these tests will actually run through gRPC using a raptor pattern or maybe something else.
Do you think you might be able to demo something on Friday?
Um, I like I don't know actually. These are only test cases, and the only test case that is complete as of now is the traffic access and traffic spec, which the traffic spec just what it does is it just checks the CRDs whether these are like applicable or not. But what I can like what I can show is how the test will run or uh, what are the assertion and how Cuttle and everything blends in. I guess I can do that.
Yep. It wouldn't be. Yeah. It would not. It would be a far cry from a complete project demo. But yeah, even if you just took Cuddle itself and just said, here's the assertions that we've made. Here's Cuddle running. Here's the
Yeah.
learn. Here's why we have learn layer 5. What that's about. And nice. Good. It'll be a good midpoint. Fair. Anything else, Naveen?
No.
All right. Briefly for my part, holy hell, I have no idea what I've done since last we met. For my part, I've been focused a little bit on SMPS to help make that specification a bit more robust. Within SMPS, there's a couple of protobuf or proto files that we've been defining. And so today there are 2 in this spec. I have intentionally not scheduled a recurring meeting within the CNCF to advance this spec because I don't feel like because I need someone to champion it. I can't, my plate overflows and I don't want to engage very publicly and broadly on something that we're not going to advance quickly. So too many priorities at the moment. And so that's probably something I should talk to Kanishkar about when he comes back from exams. So Kanishkar is out for a week on exams. He's been helping advance this quite a bit. Kanishkar has been taking the newer specifications that we've been writing here and making and updating the implementation inside of Meshery, so that when you define a performance test in Meshery, that on the back end it's described like this, that you could import a file, you could import and export the definitions of those test configs in this format. So Dhruv, of part of our conversation about service mesh, our conversation was about performance test profiles. The back end of that has been worked on recently and looks a bit like this, but we don't, and so I guess just for context, some things that I'm going to do before we meet next week is we'll have a Gatsby theme in hand. We will hopefully have communicated some of the decisions that Nitish has made about starting with the cache package, starting with the custom controller, and informing Adeep and Vinayak and asking that they help in getting going. We might want to have Vinayak join a different meeting other than the SMI call, so that we can have a discussion on Mesh Sync specifically. Ideally, that would just be this meeting. As we go to end here, guys, Nitish, is there anything else specific that you need to unblock you from kind of moving forward a bit on Mesh Sync?
I guess I do need to know what are we trying to do in the first pass? Am I just creating watchers for resources? What's the output? What are the interfaces? I mean, we need to get the architecture down for mesh sync, and I need to understand that. Just a layout of maybe just a Swagger spec, or what APIs we expose, and what our responses are.
Say a little bit more on that last piece. I'm not sure that I'm thinking of it from the right direction. What responses we would have from.
I mean, it's a request response driven controller. So we need to spec that out, what the request bodies are, what the response objects are, what kind of APIs are we exposing, and then based on how that spec is laid out, it'll be much clearer on how we want to implement their handlers.
Right. Got you. Okay. And so if I'm thinking, well, I hate to toss this in, and hopefully it doesn't complicate this a lot, but is GraphQL starts to come to mind as a potential, as a highly flexible interface that might make some sense for us here. That there are any number of questions, any number of queries, any number of requests that in the future we're going to want to make based on stuff that I can't articulate at the moment, which is like, for a given node, for a given service, does that service have these 4 characteristics, these 4 pieces of metadata? And that would be within a particular cluster, or like, I'm not sure what all those, or rather, I guess what I was, there are a lot of those types of questions. What would it look like to have a GraphQL interface to what becomes basically that cache data store? I realize that you can't, I mean, you still need to define what some of those questions are and what some of the, what the responses will be. If there is a GraphQL interface, okay, well, let me step back and say that the cache package, it doesn't, I'm assuming it doesn't come with the REST API, correct? Like it doesn't. Like that custom controller, that's an embedded data store, embedded memory data store, right?
So this is the Kubernetes cache.
Yeah.
I haven't tried it, but yeah, I'm guessing it has its own. It's probably an embedded library. I don't know if it's an actual component of the API server, or it's just something you embed in your controller.
And Vinayak knows. I think he may have. Okay, good. I guess I have a better sense of even answering kind of my own question about what do you need next. I'll be working towards this.
Okay.
Shit, we'll get there. We're getting there. Thanks, guys. I'm sorry that I've been a little bit off. It's I need to go get more sleep. So, D-Raj, very nice to have you. There's a couple of people I want to introduce you to in the community. So if I don't do that very soon, please remind me, because I think there's some other folks who've got some similar focus as you. Might be nice to meet them.
Yeah, I've already met Dhiraj. In fact, I was having a conversation with him today in LinkedIn.
Oh, really?
It's good to see him.
Oh, with Vinayak or?
No, Dheeraj.
Oh, okay. Oh, very good.
Actually, we had applied to the same Linux Foundation for the Argo project this time. So I'd asked him if it would fit or not.
Ah. The Argo CD project, right?
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, shit. Okay. D-Rush, thanks for coming. Dhruv, man, did you hear that enunciation? Like that was almost perfect, man. So.
Yeah, it was.
Okay. Okay. We're at time. Thanks a bunch, guys. It's nice to see you. Talk to you guys really soon.
Later.
Okay. Bye all. See you guys.